Not a toy store, bitch. They laughed at the nurse in the gun shop until the owner walked in. The kid behind the counter didn't even look up. He just grabbed the pistol, slapped it down on the glass case and said, loud enough for the whole shop to hear, "Here you go, sweetheart. It's not too heavy for you, is it?" Then he turned to his buddy and laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, open-mouthed laugh. Like she was the punchline to a joke she hadn't been told yet. The woman in the blue scrubs didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, didn't storm out. She just looked at the gun, then looked at him, and something passed behind her eyes. Something old and quiet and terrifying that nobody in that shop was smart enough to notice. Nobody except one man, and he wasn't there yet. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. It was a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday, not a Tuesday that announced itself with thunder or tension in the air. Just a flat, ordinary Tuesday in early October. The kind that smells like dried leaves and cold coffee and the tail end of a long work week. The sun was already thinking about going down before 5 o'clock, and the strip mall on Carver Road looked exactly the way it always looked. Half-empty parking lot, a nail salon on one end, a sandwich place in the middle, and on the far corner, tucked between a cell phone repair kiosk and an insurance office, a gun shop called Dalton's Firearms and Range. The sign above the door was hand-painted. The letters were slightly uneven, done by someone who cared more about getting it done than getting it perfect. There was a small American flag decal in the bottom corner of the front window, sun-faded to a pale pink. The kind of place that had been there for 20-something years and would probably be there for 20 more. Solid, familiar, unapologetic about what it was. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed like they always did. The glass cases ran the length of the shop in a long L shape, filled with handguns of every size and configuration. Compact 9s, full-size 40s, revolvers that looked like they'd been pulled out of a Western. On the wall behind the counter, the long guns were mounted in neat rows. Bolt-action rifles, shotguns, and along the far left panel, the AR platform rifles in various configurations. A few hunting accessories hung from pegboard hooks. A small TV in the corner played a cable news channel on mute, with the captions running. Behind the counter stood two young men. The one on the left was named Derek, 24 years old, broad-shouldered with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been seriously wrong about anything yet. He had a trimmed beard that he'd been growing since September and was unreasonably proud of it. He worked at Dalton's 4 days a week and spent the other 3 days at the gym and posting videos online about firearms he'd mostly read about rather than actually used. He knew enough to be dangerous in a conversation, not enough to know the difference. The one on the right was Tyler, 22, skinnier, quieter, but quick to laugh when Derek laughed, which was often. Tyler had only been working at Dalton's for about 4 months. He was still learning the inventory, still figuring out which customers needed patience and which ones needed to be redirected. He hadn't developed much of a filter yet. He was the kind of kid who wasn't mean on purpose. He just hadn't learned to think before his face did. They were talking about suppressors, not about selling them, just talking, the way young guys in gun shops do on slow afternoons, when there's nobody to impress and the hours stretch long. Derek was explaining something he'd seen in a review video. Tyler was half listening, half watching the door. That was when the door opened. The bell above it gave its small, reliable jingle. She came in the way a person comes in when they've already thought about the door twice before deciding to walk through it. Not hesitant, exactly. More like deliberate. Like every step she took was accounted for. She was somewhere in her mid-30s, though she carried herself in a way that made age feel like a secondary detail. Medium height, blonde hair pulled back in a clip that hadn't been adjusted since early that morning, a few strands loose around her face. She was wearing blue scrubs, the kind that hospitals use, navy blue with a small logo embroidered on the left chest pocket. And she had a canvas tote bag on one shoulder and a set of keys still in her left hand. The kind of woman who just came from somewhere and hadn't fully arrived yet. Her name was Emma. Emma Doyle. She looked tired. Not the complaining kind of tired, the other kind. The kind that lives behind the eyes and doesn't say anything about itself. The kind that gets earned. She walked to the counter, set her keys down next to the register pad, and looked at Derek with a small, polite nod. "Hi," she said. "I'm looking for a handgun. Home defense primarily. Compact or mid-size. Something I can manage comfortably." Derek looked at her. Then he looked at Tyler. Then he looked back at her. "Sure thing," he said. There was already something in his voice, a slight elevation, an uptick of amusement that hadn't been earned yet. "Any experience with firearms?" "Some," she said simply. Tyler made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, the precursor to one. Derek reached under the case and brought out a compact 9mm, a popular, well-regarded gun, entry-level by the standards of anyone who knew what they were looking at, and set it on the countertop mat. "This one's real popular with first-timers," he said. "Easy to operate, not too heavy." Emma looked at the gun. She didn't reach for it right away. She looked at it the way a person looks at something they've seen before in a different context, recognizing the shape, running a quick internal inventory. Then she picked it up. And that was the first moment, the first small, quiet moment where something shifted. Because the way she picked it up was not the way a first-timer picks up a gun. There was no awkward repositioning, no hesitation about where to put her fingers, no glance at Derek for confirmation that she was holding it correctly. She brought it up in one smooth motion, checked the chamber without being told, indexed her trigger finger correctly along the frame without thinking about it, and turned it slightly to examine the sight picture. Tyler noticed. His almost laugh faded. Derek noticed too, but he'd already committed to the bit. "You done okay so far," he said, grinning. "Most ladies need a second to get used to the weight." Emma lowered the gun and set it back on the mat. Her expression hadn't changed. "I appreciate that," she said. "Can I look at the AR-15s? There it was, the sentence that cracked Derek fully open. He didn't even try to hide it. He turned to Tyler and the laugh just came out. Genuine, delighted, the kind of laugh that means you think you've just been handed the best material of your afternoon. "The AR-15s, Derek repeated, like he was reading something off a funny sign. "Yeah, sure, yeah." He was already moving toward the rifle wall, still chuckling. "Tyler, she wants to see the ARs. Tyler smiled because Tyler always smiled when Derek did, but his eyes tracked Emma carefully. Something was making him uneasy, and he hadn't put a name to it yet. "You sure you don't want to start somewhere a little more?" Derek paused, turning with a rifle in his hands, his grin wide and uncareful. "Manageable? We got some real nice pepper sprays up front. Good for home defense, too." He was still smiling when he said it. The words came out easy, like he'd said something like them before, like he had a routine for this. Emma looked at him, not with anger, not with hurt, with something much harder to read, a kind of patient assessment, like she was running a quick calculation and waiting for the numbers to finish. "I've used one before," she said, nodding toward the AR he was holding. "Can I see the sights?" Derek blinked. He glanced at Tyler again, this time with something slightly different in the look. Still amused, but with a tiny splinter of something else starting to form. He set the rifle on the counter. Emma didn't reach for it immediately. She looked at the configuration first. Then she looked at Derek. "What's the twist rate?" she asked. Derek's smile didn't fall exactly, but it recalibrated. "The 1 in 8, he said, a half-second later than he should have. "Chrome-lined barrel?" Yeah, it is." "What's the trigger pull on this one?" Tyler had stopped smiling. Emma hadn't raised her voice, hadn't changed her posture, hadn't done anything adversarial. She was just asking questions. Quiet, specific, technical questions. in the same even tone she'd used to say hello, and the effect was like watching a person slowly climb stairs that Derek had insisted weren't there. An older man on the far side of the shop, a heavy-set man in a canvas hunting jacket, who'd been looking at shotgun shells and minding his own business, had turned around. He was watching Emma now. His name was Gerald Mercer, and Gerald had been coming into Dalton's for 11 years. Gerald had served 2 tours in Vietnam and had forgotten more about firearms than either of these boys would learn in a decade. And Gerald was watching this woman with the focused attention of someone who recognized something. He didn't say a word. He just watched. Derek recovered. That was the thing about Derek. He was quick on his feet in a social situation, even when the ground was shifting. He laughed again, lighter this time, like he was in on the joke. "You've done some reading," he said. It was meant as a compliment shaped like a consolation, meant to put a ceiling on her. Emma set the rifle down gently and looked at him. "I've done some shooting," she said. The fluorescent light above the counter buzzed once, quietly, like punctuation. For a moment, just a moment, nobody said anything. Tyler was looking at the countertop. Gerald Mercer had gone very still on the other side of the shop. Derek was working something out in his expression, trying to decide which direction to take this. And then, right then, in that specific pocket of quiet, the door opened again. The bell jingled. But nobody looked at the door right away, because they were all still caught in the weight of what Emma had just said. That 3-word sentence, "I've done some shooting," had a specific gravity to it that didn't match the scrubs, didn't match the canvas tote, didn't match the tired eyes and the loose hair and the polite smile. It landed differently than it should have, and nobody in that room could quite explain why yet. Derek finally looked at the door. Tyler looked. Gerald Mercer looked. And then the sound came. A shattering, clean and sharp and immediate. The specific sound of ceramic hitting tile, of something slipping through fingers that had gone suddenly, completely slack. Everyone turned. There was a man standing just inside the doorway, late 50s, solid build, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed close, and a dark green jacket with the Dalton's logo on the chest. He was had been holding, a large takeout coffee cup. The cup was now on the floor. The lid had come off. Dark coffee was spreading across the tile in a slow, definitive puddle. The man wasn't looking at the coffee. He wasn't looking at Derek or Tyler or Gerald Mercer. He was looking at Emma. His name was Ray Dalton. He owned this shop. He had owned it for 23 years. Ray Dalton had looked down the barrel of things that would have unmade most people. He was not, by any reasonable measure, a man who dropped things. His face had gone completely white. "Emma," he said. And it wasn't a greeting. It was the sound a person makes when they see something they thought they'd never see again. Emma turned, and for the first time since she'd walked through that door, something in her expression changed. The careful, measured composure didn't disappear exactly. It just made room for something else. Something warmer and older and more complicated. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, not quite not one. "Ray," she said. Derek looked at Ray. Ray wasn't looking at Derek. Tyler looked at Tyler's shoes because Tyler had somehow already understood that something was happening here that was above his pay grade. Gerald Mercer hadn't moved at all. Ray walked to the counter. He walked the way a man walks when his legs are working independently of his brain, because his brain is still trying to process something. He stopped at the counter and he put both hands flat on the glass, and he just looked at her for a long moment. "How long have you been in town?" he said. "About 3 weeks, Emma said. "I'm at St. Catherine's now. Night shifts, mostly. You could have called." I didn't want to make a thing of it. Ray let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a very long time. Then he looked at Derek. The temperature of that look could have cooled the room by 15 degrees. Derek felt it physically. He actually shifted his weight. "What were you helping her with?" Ray said. His voice was level, extremely level, the kind of level that takes effort to maintain. She was looking at the Colts, the Compact 9, and the ARs, Tyler said. He wasn't sure why he said it. He said it because honesty seemed like the safest option in a situation he no longer understood. Ray looked at the rifle still sitting on the counter mat. Then he looked at Emma. "What configuration are you looking for?" "Something I can put in a safe at home," Emma said. "Pistol grip, 16-inch, nothing fancy. I just want it to be reliable." "I've got a Daniel Defense in the back," Ray said. "Just came in last week. I'll go get it." He didn't move yet. He was still looking at her, like he needed another second to make sure she was real. Derek cleared his throat. Do you two know each other?" Ray turned to him slowly, and when Ray turned to Derek slowly, it meant something. It meant, whatever is about to come out of my mouth, I am choosing every word carefully because this is a situation that deserves care. "Derek," Ray said, "how long have you been working here?" "About 14 months. 14 months, Ray repeated. "In 14 months, have I ever told you that we treat every customer in this shop with the same respect we'd show each other?" Derek's jaw was starting to tighten. "Yeah." "Have I told you that we don't make assumptions?" "Yeah." "Have I told you that the person standing across that counter from you might know 10 times more than you do, and the smartest thing you can do is find that out before you open your mouth?" Silence. Derek said, "Yes, sir." Ray nodded. He straightened up. He looked once more at Emma, and what was in that look was not simple. It was not the look of a man who had just bumped into an old acquaintance. It was something heavier than that, something that had weight and texture and a whole history behind it. Then he went to the back room. The shop was very quiet. Gerald Mercer walked to the counter. He set his shotgun shells down next to the register and looked at Emma. "Marine Corps?" he said. Emma looked at him. "Army," she said. 68 whiskey. Gerald nodded slowly. 68 whiskey was the Army designation for combat medic. It was not a simple designation. It was not a behind-the-lines designation. "Vietnam," Gerald said, by way of introduction. Not bragging, just establishing what kind of conversation this was. Emma nodded back. "Thank you for your service," she said quietly. "Thank you for yours," Gerald said. And then he picked up his shells and walked to the register to pay, because he'd said what he needed to say, and he was done. Tyler was staring at Emma with an expression that had moved entirely past amusement and was now somewhere in the neighborhood of stunned and ashamed and not sure what to do with either. He looked like a kid who had walked into a room confident he knew what was in it and found something completely different on the other side of the door. Derek hadn't said anything else. He was standing 2 feet back from the counter with his arms at his sides and his jaw set, and his eyes doing the specific kind of work they do when a person is processing something they don't want to accept. Emma wasn't paying attention to either of them. She was looking at the back door through which Ray had disappeared, and there was something in her expression now, quiet, private, that had nothing to do with the shop or the guns or the 2 young men who had spent the last 10 minutes underestimating her. It was the expression of someone standing near the edge of a memory. Not a happy one, not a terrible one of those complicated ones that doesn't come with instructions. Ray came back through the door with a rifle case in both hands. He set it on the counter and unzipped it. The rifle inside was clean and well configured, exactly what he'd described. He turned it toward Emma without ceremony, because ceremony was not what this moment required. Emma picked it up, and the way she held it, the way her hands settled into position, the way her cheek found the stock with the automatic precision of something that had been practiced until it became physical memory, told the whole story that her face and her clothes and her tired eyes had refused to tell. Derek watched. Tyler watched. Neither of them said a word. Ray watched too, and his expression was something that only a person who had seen what he had seen would understand. A specific kind of gratitude that has nothing polite or performative about it. The kind that exists underneath everything else. The kind you carry in your chest like a stone you've learned to breathe around. Good balance, Emma said, lowering the rifle. Best I've had in a while, Ray agreed. She looked at him. What are you asking for it? He named a price. It was fair. It was maybe slightly less than fair, actually, and both of them knew it, and neither of them acknowledged it. Emma reached into her canvas tote for her wallet. Derek watched her do it. He watched her pull out her ID and her card and set them on the counter with the calm efficiency of a person completing a transaction they had thought through before they arrived. He watched her sign the paperwork when Ray put it in front of her. He watched all of it and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would help, and he had finally, at 24 years old, learned in the space of the last 12 minutes that silence could be its own kind of reckoning. Tyler was still staring at the countertop. Something had opened up inside him that was going to take a while to close. That was okay. That was actually the right response. Some realizations need to sit in the open air before they start to mean something. Ray was filling out the transfer paperwork when he stopped and looked at Derek again. She pulled me out, he said. His voice had gone quiet. Not dramatic, just quiet. The way things that are true tend to be quiet when you say them plainly. Fallujah, 2005. I took shrapnel in the leg and 2 of my guys were down. She ran into the street. He paused. She ran into the street while it was still hot, and she pulled me out. Another pause. She took a round in the shoulder doing it. Derek's throat worked. He swallowed. She never made a big thing of it, Ray said. I've looked for her for 15 years. He looked back down at the paperwork. And the first thing she gets when she walks into my shop is you 2 clowns making her feel like she's in the wrong place. The silence after that was not empty. It had weight. It had the weight of everything that hadn't been said before it. Emma had finished signing. She looked up at Ray, and something passed between them. One of those looks that doesn't need translation, that exists in the specific language of people who have been through something together that most people haven't. I'm good, Ray, she said. Really. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. I know you are, he said. You always were. Emma gathered her paperwork, checked that the case was latched, and picked up her keys from the counter. She looked at Derek once, not with anger, not with contempt, with something that was harder to bear than either of those things. Simple, clear recognition. The look of someone who has been underestimated enough times to have made her peace with it, but hasn't forgotten any of them. Good shop, she said to Ray. Good customer, he said back. She walked to the door. Her hand touched the handle. The afternoon light came in gold and sideways through the front window as she pushed it open. The bell above the door gave its small, reliable jingle, and Emma Doyle walked out into the parking lot, the rifle case in her hand, the keys in the other, moving with the same quiet, deliberate step she'd come in with, and she was gone. The fluorescent light hummed. The coffee cup sat on the floor in its spreading dark puddle. Gerald Mercer was gone. Outside, a car started. Ray put the pen down. He looked at his 2 employees. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they've had to explain something they hope they'd never have to explain. Mop, he said to Tyler. He pointed at the coffee. Tyler went to get the mop. Ray looked at Derek for one more long moment. You've got some thinking to do, Ray said. Start with this. Next time someone walks in that door, before you decide what they know and what they don't, what do you actually know about them? Derek didn't answer, because there wasn't an answer to give, and they both knew it. Ray picked up the empty transfer folder and walked to the filing cabinet. The news was still running on the silent TV. Outside, the October sky was doing what it does, going dark early, going quiet, going cold without announcing it. The strip mall parking lot was half empty. A woman in blue scrubs with a rifle case and a canvas tote bag was somewhere out there driving home in the early dark to the quiet house she'd made into something safe, doing what she'd always done, quietly, without asking anyone to notice. The coffee was still on the floor when Derek finally moved, not to clean it up, not to say anything useful. He just shifted his weight from one foot to the other, like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't know how to step back from. Tyler hadn't moved at all. He was still holding the mop he'd gone to get, handle in both hands, not mopping anything. Just standing there the way people stand when their body hasn't caught up with their brain yet. Ray was at the filing cabinet. He slid the transfer folder in, pushed the drawer shut, and turned around. He looked at the front door, the door Emma had just walked through, and his expression did something complicated. It wasn't grief exactly. It wasn't relief. It was the specific look of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just been reminded of exactly how heavy it is. He walked to the back counter, reached under it, and pulled out a roll of paper towels. He tore off a long section and dropped it on top of the coffee puddle without bending down, the way a man does when he's operating on autopilot because his mind is somewhere else entirely. Derek watched him do it. "Ray," Derek said finally. His voice was careful. The careful voice of someone who knows they've made a mistake, but hasn't fully calculated the size of it yet. We didn't know." Ray didn't look up. "I know you didn't. If she had said something..." Ray did look up then, slowly. "Said something," he repeated. Derek stopped. "She walked in here," Ray said, "and asked to look at a pistol. That's all she needed to do. That's all any customer needs to do." He straightened up. His voice was still quiet, still level. But there was something underneath it now, something that had temperature and pressure behind it, like a hand pressing flat against a closed door. "She didn't owe you her resume, Derek. She didn't owe you her service record. She didn't owe you anything except the money for the product, and she paid it." Derek's jaw tightened. Tyler stared at the mop handle. "I've been running this shop for 23 years, Ray said. "You know what I've learned in 23 years? Neither of them answered. "I've learned that the people who know the most are usually the ones who talk the least about it." He picked up the wet paper towel bundle and dropped it in the trash. "The people who have actually been somewhere don't walk in here trying to prove it. They don't need to. It's already done. It's already in them." He paused. "Emma Doyle hasn't needed to prove anything to anybody since she was 22 years old, and in a place that would have broken most grown men in half." Tyler set the mop against the wall. He didn't lean it, exactly. It was more like he needed his hands free, like he needed to not be holding anything. "What happened?" Tyler asked, and his voice was younger than usual. Not the voice he used when he was trying to sound like Derek. The voice underneath that. Ray looked at him. He looked at him for a long moment, measuring something. Then he pulled a stool from behind the counter and sat down. Not because this was going to be a long story, because it was the kind of story that deserves to be told sitting down. 2005, he said. "Fallujah. You know what Fallujah was?" Tyler shook his head. "Battle of Fallujah was one of the hardest urban fights American forces saw in the entire Iraq War," Ray said. "Street by street, building by building, the kind of fighting where you don't see the whole picture. You just see the 6 feet in front of you, and you make decisions based on that." He paused. "I was 34 years old, staff sergeant, Marine infantry. I thought I knew what I was doing." Another pause, shorter. "I did not fully know what I was doing." Derek had stopped moving entirely. He was leaning against the back counter now, arms crossed, but not defensively, more like he needed the support. "We were pushing through a block on the eastern side of the city," Ray continued. "It went bad, fast. It went bad the way things go bad over there, without announcement, without warning. 1 second you're moving, and the next second 2 of your guys are down, and there's fire coming from 3 directions, and the world has gone completely sideways." He stopped, looked at his hands for a moment. "I took shrapnel in the leg, femoral area, which means if it nicks the right thing, you bleed out in about 4 minutes." The shop was completely silent. The TV in the corner was still running its silent captions. Outside, a car passed on the street. "I went down," Ray said. "I remember the ground. I remember thinking, This is it. This is the moment. This is how it ends on a Tuesday in a city I couldn't have found on a map 2 years earlier. He looked up, and then someone grabbed me. He stopped again. Let that sit. She was 22 years old, he said. 22. Army combat medic attached to our unit for that operation. She was not supposed to be in the street. Nobody was supposed to be in the street. The street was still active. Rounds coming in, guys taking cover, everything on fire. His voice had dropped lower now. Not softer, just lower. She came into that street and she got her hands on me and she did not stop moving. Tyler's mouth was slightly open. He wasn't aware of it. She got hit, Ray said. Took a round in the left shoulder while she was dragging me. I felt her body absorb it. That's a thing you don't forget, when you feel someone take a bullet while they're holding on to you. She made a sound, not a scream, just a short, sharp sound, like air going out of something. And she kept moving. He shook his head slowly. She did not stop. She got me behind cover. She got a tourniquet on my leg. She got her own wound packed, and she was giving me instructions the whole time. Calm, like she was reading from a manual, like the bullet in her shoulder was a scheduling inconvenience. Derek uncrossed his arms. His hands dropped to his sides. They medevaced both of us out, Ray said. I was in Germany for 3 weeks. She was back in the field in 6. He was quiet for a moment. I wrote to her. I tried to find her after I got home. Military records are what they are. I got some information, lost the trail, got some more. I knew she'd gone back to school, nursing, which makes complete sense if you know anything about how those people are wired. He shook his head. I just never got the right address, never got the right moment. 15 years. He looked at the front door again. And then she walks into my shop on a Tuesday afternoon, and you two are in here making jokes about pepper spray. The silence that followed was the specific kind of silence that doesn't want to be broken. Not because it's peaceful, because it's full. Derek's face had done something it didn't usually do. The performance had left it entirely. What was underneath was younger than 24, and considerably less certain of itself. He looked like someone who had just had a floor pulled out from under him and was trying to figure out where to put his feet. I didn't, he started. I know, Ray said. He wasn't angry anymore. He'd moved through the anger and out the other side into something quieter and more permanent. That's what I'm telling you, Derek. You didn't know. And you acted like not knowing was the same as knowing. He stood up from the stool. It's not. Not knowing means you wait, you watch, you ask questions, and you listen to the answers. What you don't do is fill in what you don't know with whatever makes you feel comfortable. Derek nodded. Once. The nod of a man who has received something he's going to be thinking about for a long time. Ray moved toward the back room, then stopped. He turned around. Something had occurred to him. Something he hadn't finished yet. Something that needed saying. She called herself a nurse, he said, when she introduced herself to you. Did she? Tyler thought about it. She said she was looking for a pistol for home defense. Right, Ray said. She didn't tell you she was a medic. She didn't tell you about any of it. You know why? Nobody answered. Because it doesn't matter to her, Ray said. Who she was, what she did. That's not why she came in here. She came in here to buy a gun. That's it. She doesn't carry it around like a badge. She doesn't need you to know. He paused. But here's what I need you to understand. The fact that she doesn't wear it doesn't mean it isn't there. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir, Tyler said, quietly, like it meant something. Ray looked at Derek. Yeah, Derek said, and for once, that was all he said. Ray went to the back room. The door swung closed behind him. Derek and Tyler stood in the shop alone. The afternoon light through the front window had gone from gold to gray in the time they'd been standing there. Tyler looked at the door. Derek looked at the glass cases, at the rows of handguns, at the compact 9mm that was still sitting on the countermat from when Emma had set it down. He picked it up, checked the chamber the way she'd checked it, the way he'd watched her do it and felt the floor shift under him. Set it back down. She knew more than me, he said. Not to Tyler. Not to the room. Just to the air. Tyler didn't say anything. There was nothing useful to say. Sometimes a man needs to hear himself admit something out loud before it becomes real. And the only respectful thing another person can do in that moment is let the air hold it. Derek put the gun back in the case, closed the glass panel. Outside, the first streetlights of the evening were coming on. The strip mall was going through its early evening transition, the nail salon closing up, the sandwich place turning its sign. Cars moving through the parking lot with their headlights on against the early dark. And 3 blocks away, in a hospital parking structure, Emma Doyle was putting her new rifle case in the back of her car. She did it carefully, the way she did most things. Set it flat, check that it was secure, close the hatch. She stood there for a moment with her hand resting on the back of her car, looking out at the parking structure's concrete wall, and she was thinking about Ray, about the look on his face when he'd seen her, about the coffee cup, about the specific sound it had made hitting the floor. She hadn't expected that. She'd known there was a chance. She'd seen the shop name on a Google search and thought, that's a coincidence, and then thought, maybe it isn't, and then driven by the strip mall twice before deciding to stop. She'd told herself she was just buying a gun. She'd told herself it probably wasn't the same Ray Dalton. There were probably multiple Ray Daltons in this state. It was a common enough name. She'd been lying to herself, and she'd known it, and she'd walked in anyway. She got in the car. She sat for a moment before starting it. The kind of moment that doesn't have a specific thought in it. Just wait. Just the physical sensation of having been somewhere that pulled something up from deep down. She started the car. She pulled out of the spot. She drove. Back in the shop, Ray had come out of the back room with a cleaning kit and set it on the counter. He did that sometimes when he needed to be doing something with his hands. Broke down a gun and cleaned it. Not because it needed cleaning, just for the focus of it. The repetition. The way each step follows the next without requiring you to think. Derek had found something to do with himself too. He was restocking the display case on the far side of the counter, pulling handguns from the rack and repositioning them, doing the small maintenance tasks that accumulate during a shift. He was doing it more carefully than usual, more deliberately. Tyler was behind the register, looking at something on the computer, or pretending to. Ray broke down the pistol in front of him with practiced efficiency. Barrel, guide rod, frame, slide. He picked up a patch and ran it through the barrel. "She live around here?" Tyler asked eventually. He was trying to keep his voice casual. He didn't entirely succeed. 3 weeks, she said, Ray replied. St. Catherine's, night shift. That's a rough schedule. She's always worked rough schedules, Ray said. That's just how she's built. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then, "Do you think she'll come back?" Ray thought about it. He ran another patch through the barrel. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Emma doesn't do things twice unless she has a reason. She came in here today with a specific purpose. She got what she came for." He paused. "Whether she has a reason to come back is up to her." "Did you get her number?" Derek asked. He was still facing the display case. His voice was low. Ray looked at the gun in his hands. "No," he said. "I didn't ask." "Why not?" Ray set the barrel down. He thought about how to say what he wanted to say. "Because some things you don't push," he said finally. "She knows where the shop is. She knows I'm here. If she wants to come back, she'll come back. Pushing her would be making it about me." He picked up the barrel again. "It's not about me." Derek absorbed that. He slid a handgun back into position in the display case. Then he turned around. "Ray," he said. Ray looked at him. "I'm sorry," Derek said. "For how I talked to her, He stopped, started again. "I'm genuinely sorry. Not because you know her, because it was wrong." Ray looked at him for a long moment. The fluorescent light hummed above them. The TV played its silent news. I know, Ray said. I believe you. He paused. Now hold on to that feeling. Don't let it wear off in a week and go back to the way things were. That feeling is information. Use it. Derek nodded. And this time the nod was different from before. Not the nod of someone acknowledging a dressing down, but the nod of someone making a private commitment to something. Small, quiet, real. Tyler had stopped pretending to look at the computer. He was just sitting there, elbows on the counter, chin in his hand, thinking. He'd been thinking since Emma walked out that door, and he didn't see himself stopping anytime soon. He thought about the way she'd picked up that pistol, the immediate, automatic competence of it. He thought about the questions she'd asked about the AR, the twist rate, the barrel lining, the trigger pull. Specific technical questions asked in the same tone a person uses to ask what time the pharmacy closes. He thought about what Ray had said. She was 22 years old. She ran into the street. She took a bullet and she kept moving. He thought about himself at 22, what he'd been doing at 22, and the comparison was not flattering, and he knew it, and he sat with it. That was the thing about moments like this one. They didn't just pass. They installed themselves. They became a before and after, a line drawn through a person's understanding of the world, and on one side is who you were, and on the other side is who you're going to have to decide to be. Tyler didn't fully have the vocabulary for it yet, but he felt the line. He felt it clearly. Ray reassembled the pistol with the easy, unhurried motions of someone who has done it 1,000 times. Click, click. He set it on the mat and dry-fired it twice to check the function. Then he put it back in the case. He looked at the front door one more time. The parking lot was dark now. Full dark, the October kind. The streetlights were casting their orange pools on the asphalt. A couple walked past the front window, close together against the cold, not looking in. Ray thought about Emma driving home. He thought about what home defense meant to someone like her. Not fear, not paranoia, but the simple, practical application of a mindset she'd been trained into. Protect the space. Have a plan. Don't be caught without the tools. He thought about her saying, "I hope I never have to use it again," and the specific weight of that sentence, the years and miles inside it. He thought about 2005. He thought about the street and the ground and the feeling of her hands on him. He thought about the sound she'd made when the bullet hit her and how she hadn't stopped moving. 15 years. And she'd walked in the door and the first thing that had happened was two young men laughing at her. He felt something move through him that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. Something that lived between them. He'd had that feeling before, over the years, in various forms. The specific frustration of watching the world fail to recognize something real. Something earned. Something that deserved better than casual dismissal by people who had never been tested. He'd built this shop partly because of that frustration, partly because he'd come home from Fallujah with a leg that had a story in it, and a head full of things that needed somewhere to go. And working with firearms, the discipline of them, the responsibility of them, the community of people who took them seriously, had given him structure when structure was what he'd needed most. He'd built it to be a place that respected that, a place where knowledge was honored and assumptions were held in check, and every person who walked through the door was treated as if they might know more than you. He hadn't always succeeded at that. 2 employees in their afternoon of carelessness were proof of that tonight. But the shop was still here, and so was he, and so apparently was Emma Doyle. Ray locked the display case and pocketed the key. He looked at Derek. "Close up tonight," he said. "I'll be in at 9 tomorrow." Derek nodded. "Yeah, sure." Ray got his jacket from the hook by the back door. He put it on. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the door to the parking lot, not quite going through it yet. "She used to say something," Ray said, quietly, like he was talking to himself as much as anyone else. "Back there, when things went sideways, she used to say, 'Just move forward. Just keep moving. That's all. Just move forward.'" He opened the door and went out into the cold. Derek stood alone at the counter. Tyler was still at the register. The shop was quiet around them. The comfortable, specific quiet of a place that knows what it is and doesn't apologize for it. After a long moment, Tyler looked up. "Hey," he said. Derek looked at him. "Next person that comes in," Tyler said, "I'm going to ask what they're looking for, and then I'm going to listen." Derek looked at him for a second. Something in his face settled. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." The TV played its silent news. The fluorescent light hummed above the counter. Outside, Carver Road went on doing what it always did. Cars moving, people moving, the ordinary Tuesday night running its course, indifferent to the small, permanent shift that had just occurred inside a gun shop on the corner of a strip mall that most people drove past without looking at. Somewhere in the early evening dark, Emma Doyle was going home. She was tired, and she had her gun, and she had an early shift tomorrow, and she wasn't thinking about the two young men, or their laughter, or the look on Ray Dalton's face when the coffee cup fell. She was just moving forward, like she always had. 3 days passed before Ray heard from her. He hadn't expected to hear from her at all, if he was honest. That was just Emma. She moved through situations the way water moves through a room, finding her path, not announcing herself, leaving things changed without making a production of the changing. She'd bought her gun and she'd gone home, and that would have been the entirety of it if Ray's phone hadn't buzzed on a Thursday night at 7:42 with a number he didn't recognize and a text that said simply, "Good shop. The Daniel defense is excellent." He stared at that text for a long time. Then he saved the number and typed back, "Glad to hear it. The coffee was less excellent." She replied with a single period. He took that as the Emma Doyle version of a laugh. He didn't push. He'd meant what he said to Derek about that. He put the phone in his pocket and went back to the inventory spreadsheet he'd been working on and let it be what it was. A small, quiet signal in the dark. A confirmation that she was real and close and okay. That was enough. That was more than he'd had for 15 years. Derek was in the shop the next morning when Ray arrived. He was already behind the counter, coffee in hand, not Ray's coffee, his own, which he'd brought in a sealed travel mug as if he'd learned something from Tuesday's mess. He was with a customer, an older man with a hunting license printed from the county website, and a very specific question about .30 caliber ammunition for deer season. And Derek was answering him carefully, listening first, then answering, not performing, not showing off, not filling the space with his own voice just to fill it, actually listening. Ray watched from the doorway for a moment before he came in. He didn't say anything about it to Derek. He just hung up his jacket and started the day. But he noticed. Tyler came in at noon. He'd done something Ray hadn't expected. He'd spent the previous evening doing research. Not research for a video, not casual browsing. Real research. He'd looked up 68 whiskey. He'd looked up the Battle of Fallujah. He'd watched footage from embedded journalists and read accounts from soldiers who'd been there, and spent 2 hours in the specific kind of silence that descends on a young person when they encounter something that reframes everything they thought they understood about the world. He hadn't told anyone he'd done this, but it was in him now, and it showed up in the way he moved through the shop that afternoon, a little more careful, a little more aware. He didn't know yet that the story wasn't finished. None of them did. That came on a Saturday, 12 days after Emma Doyle walked through the door of Dalton's Firearms and turned a quiet Tuesday afternoon into something none of them would forget. It was a Saturday morning, and the shop was busy the way it gets on Saturdays. A mix of serious buyers, regulars checking in, a few people who'd been thinking about a purchase for weeks and had finally decided to act on it. Ray was in the back dealing with a transfer paperwork issue when the bell above the door jingled, and Derek looked up from the counter. The man who came in was not a regular. Ray's regulars had a specific energy, familiar, unhurried, the ease of people who knew the layout and didn't need to orient themselves. This man oriented himself. He stood just inside the door for a second and looked at the cases, looked at the wall, looked at the counter. Early 50s, military posture that had softened somewhat with age but hadn't disappeared. He was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a dark flannel shirt, but carrying himself with the particular uprightness of someone who'd spent years being corrected out of slouching. Derek watched him approach. "Morning. What can I help you with?" The man reached the counter. He had steady eyes, the kind of steady that isn't performed. "I'm looking for Ray Dalton," he said. "Is he in?" Derek hesitated. "He's in the back. Can I ask what it's about?" The man considered this. "You can tell him Marcus Webb wants to say hello. He'll know who that is." Derek went to the back room. Ray was on the phone, finger up in the one-moment gesture, finishing a sentence about a consignment piece. Derek waited. Ray hung up, looked at him. "Guy out front," Derek said. "Says his name is Marcus Webb. Says you'll know him." Something happened in Ray's face. It was fast, a flash of something that went through his eyes like a light switching on in another room. He was already moving before Derek finished the sentence. He came through the door and stopped 3 feet from the counter. Marcus Webb was standing on the other side of the glass, and he was smiling. A real, unguarded smile, the kind that belongs to a very specific category of reunion. The category where the two people involved weren't sure they'd ever see each other again. "Staff Sergeant," Marcus said. "Don't call me that," Ray said. But he was smiling too now, the smile breaking through before he could organize his face into anything more composed. "What the? How did you know I was here?" "I've known you were here for 6 years," Marcus said. "I just didn't want to intrude on a man's life without a reason." "And now you have a reason." Marcus's smile changed. It stayed on his face but went a degree deeper. "I do," he said. He reached into the breast pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the counter and slid it toward Ray. Ray looked at it without picking it up. Then he picked it up, unfolded it, read it. Tyler, who was pretending to reorganize the display of cleaning supplies to his left, watched Ray's expression change as he read. It went from recognition to something more complicated, something that had weight in it and history, and something else that Tyler couldn't name from where he was standing. Ray looked up. "When did you get this?" 3 weeks ago, Marcus said. "And you waited 3 weeks." "I needed to think about it." Ray put the paper down on the counter, flat, with his hand on it. "Does she know you're here?" The question landed hard. Tyler felt it from 10 feet away. The sudden change in the air, the way the conversation had just stepped off a curb neither of them had been watching for. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. Ray took his hand off the paper. He looked at the wall. Then he looked back at Marcus. "Sit down," he said. "Tyler, get this man a coffee, please." Tyler moved. The morning crowd was flowing around them. Other customers, other conversations. But the small gravity of Ray and Marcus at the counter had created its own separate space. A pocket of stillness in the busy shop where something old and significant was quietly insisting on being addressed. Marcus sat on the stool Ray kept behind the counter, the one Ray himself had sat on 12 days ago when he told the story of Fallujah to 2 young employees who hadn't yet understood what was sitting in front of them. The same stool, a different piece of the same story. Marcus Webb had served with Ray in Fallujah. Not in the same unit. Marcus was Army, attached from a different company, but in the same block, on the same day, in the same firefight that had put Ray on the ground and Emma running into the street. He'd been behind cover 40 feet away when it happened. He'd watched the whole thing. He'd watched Emma take that round and keep moving, and he'd been there when they loaded both Ray and Emma into the evac vehicle. And he had spent the better part of 20 years thinking about it on a semi-regular basis. He had done a tour after that one, and another one after that, and then a medical separation that he described with the flat brevity of someone who had made peace with the facts, if not everything that surrounded them. He'd gone back to school on the GI Bill, done 20 credits of criminal justice, dropped out, worked construction for a while, worked security for a while, found his way eventually to something that worked for him and stuck with it. He was good now. He was fine. He was the kind of person who had assembled a workable life out of materials that hadn't always cooperated. And 3 weeks ago, he had received a letter, not an email, an actual letter in an actual envelope with a return address in this exact city, from someone named Emma Doyle. Tyler set a coffee on the counter in front of Marcus and stepped back far enough to be respectful, but stayed close enough that he could hear. Ray didn't tell him to go anywhere. Ray understood, in the way he'd come to understand things about Tyler in the last 12 days, that this was important for the young man to hear. "She wrote to me because she couldn't call," Marcus said, wrapping both hands around the paper cup. "She said she's bad at calling. She said she always has been." A small pause. "She found my contact through the veterans service group I volunteer with on weekends. She said she'd been in the city for 3 weeks and she was doing okay, but she was having trouble sleeping. She said she was having some nights that were hard." Ray's expression didn't change visibly, but something in his posture shifted. An almost imperceptible alignment, like a man bracing for something. "She said she didn't want to make it into a thing," Marcus continued. "She specifically said that. She said, 'I'm writing this because I have to tell someone, and you're someone who was there.'" He set the cup down. "She said she keeps dreaming about the street." The shop noise continued around them, a couple asking about shotguns, a phone ringing, the bell above the door. All of it happening in a completely different layer of reality from the one Ray and Marcus were sitting in. "Does she have support?" Ray said. His voice was controlled, but the control was working hard. "She's got a therapist," Marcus said. "She's been seeing someone since she got out. She made clear in the letter she's not in crisis. It's not that kind of thing. It's just the nights. The specific kind of hard that comes with the specific kind of thing she went through." He paused. "She went through a lot of specific things, Ray. More than just the day you were there." Ray nodded. He knew. Not the details. Emma had never been someone who distributed the details of herself freely, but he knew in the general, bone-deep way of someone who understood what that service meant, what it cost, what it deposited in a person's nervous system that couldn't be withdrawn. "Why are you telling me this?" Ray said. Marcus looked at him. The question wasn't hostile. It was genuine. A man who needed to understand the geometry of a situation before he knew how to stand in it. "Because she wrote to me," Marcus said, "but I think she came here because of you." He picked up the coffee again. "She knew your name was on this shop. She's been driving past it for 3 weeks, she told me. 3 weeks before she walked in." He let that land. "She didn't come in for the Daniel defense, Ray. She could have bought that anywhere." Ray was quiet for a long moment. Tyler had gone completely still. He had stopped pretending to do anything else. He was just standing there, and the weight of what he was hearing was rearranging things inside him that had already been rearranged once this week and were apparently not done yet. Derek had come back to the counter without anyone noticing. He'd come back to check on a customer question and had instead walked into the edge of this conversation and had the good judgment to recognize that he should not speak and should not leave. Ray looked at the piece of paper on the counter. Emma's letter, or the portion Marcus had brought, a single paragraph folded twice. He didn't read it again. He just looked at it the way you look at something when you're deciding what it means for what you have to do next. "I need to call her," Ray said. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I think so too. She's going to tell me she's fine." "Yes," Marcus said. "She is definitely going to tell you she's fine. And she'll mean part of it." "She'll mean most of it," Marcus said. "That's the thing about Emma. She's not lying when she says she's fine. She is fine, by any standard she's ever held herself to, which is a standard that would break most people." He paused. "But fine isn't the same as not needing anything." Ray picked up his phone from his pocket. He looked at the text thread with Emma. 3 exchanges, brief, the digital equivalent of a wave across a parking lot. He looked at her number for a moment, Then he put the phone back in his pocket. Marcus watched him. Not now? Not here, Ray said. Not in the middle of a Saturday. He looked at Marcus. She'll be on nights at St. Catherine's. She gets off at 7 in the morning. I'll call her at 7:30. Marcus nodded slowly. You know her schedule. I looked up St. Catherine's, Ray said, without apology, without embarrassment. Night shift nursing schedule is standard, 7 to 7. The corner of Marcus's mouth moved. 15 years, and you still think about her schedule. Ray looked at him. Don't, he said. I'm not saying anything. You were about to. I was about to say it's good, Marcus said simply. It's good that someone does. The moment sat between them, quiet and specific and full. Tyler had turned slightly away, giving it space, which was the right instinct. Derek was looking at the floor, his jaw doing the thing it did when he was processing something that challenged his understanding of how adults worked. He had thought, in the general way of 24-year-olds, that people of Ray's age had finished becoming themselves, that the large emotional events were behind them, tidied up, resolved into whatever they were going to be. He was learning, in the accelerated way that happens when life decides to teach you something quickly, that this was not how it worked, that the things people carry don't schedule themselves for convenient resolution, that a man could own a gun shop for 23 years and still have a 15-year-old knot in his chest that a Tuesday afternoon could pull loose without warning. Marcus stayed for another 40 minutes. He and Ray talked, really talked, the way two people talk when they've been through something and have spent years processing it separately and are finally doing some of it together, out loud. They talked about the deployment, about the guys who didn't come home, about the years after, the difficult particular texture of returning to a civilian world that hadn't paused while you were gone. They talked around Emma more than about her, using her name the way people use the name of someone who matters, sparingly, with care, as if saying it too many times might wear something out. Tyler listened. He didn't contribute anything. He wasn't expected to. His job in this specific 40 minutes was to be a witness, and he did it well. At some point, a customer asked Derek a question about a transfer waiting period, and Derek answered it correctly and professionally, and didn't once look over at Ray and Marcus or let his distraction show. He was getting better at the job in real time. Under pressure and humility and the specific education of the last 2 weeks, he was becoming the kind of person the job required. Marcus finished his coffee and stood up. He put the folded paragraph back in his breast pocket. Leave that, Ray said. Marcus looked at him. I want to have it, Ray said, to remember what she wrote, the way she wrote it. Marcus considered this. Then he put the paper on the counter. Don't let her know I gave it to you, he said. She'll know, Ray said. Yeah, Marcus agreed. She will. She always knows things. He pulled on his jacket. 7:30 tomorrow morning. 7:30, Ray confirmed. Marcus nodded once, the kind of nod that means something, and walked to the door. The bell jingled. He was gone. Ray stood at the counter with the folded paragraph in front of him, and the Saturday morning shop flowing around him like water around a rock. He stood there for a moment that was longer than a moment and shorter than it felt. Then he picked up the paper, folded it once more, and put it in his shirt pocket. He went back to work. But at 7:29 the next morning, Ray Dalton was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on Millbrook Avenue, with his phone in his hand and a coffee going cold in the cup holder. And he was staring at Emma Doyle's number, and he was thinking about what Marcus had said. She didn't come in for the gun. She's been driving past for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Every day or every few days, driving past a strip mall on Carver Road, slowing down maybe, looking at the faded sign with the uneven letters and the pale flag decal in the window, and deciding not to stop. Until Tuesday. Until she parked the car and went in. Until she asked to see the pistols with that careful, deliberate step that had a whole history pressed into it. She'd been looking for him. Ray understood. In the gut-deep way, he understood most things that mattered, that this was not a small thing. Emma Doyle did not look for people. Emma Doyle moved forward, like she'd always said to do, kept moving, kept her head and her hands busy, and her feet pointed in the direction of the next thing that needed doing. She didn't look back. She had never been built for looking back. And she had driven past his shop for 3 weeks. His thumb moved to her name in the contacts list. He pressed call. It rang twice. "Ray," she said. Her voice was the same as it always had been. Clear, unhurried, the voice of someone who woke up already present. "Emma," he said. A pause. Not an uncomfortable one. The kind that happens between two people who don't need noise to be okay. "Marcus called you," she said. "Marcus came to the shop," Ray said, "yesterday morning." Another pause. He heard her exhale. Not a sigh exactly, the sound of someone putting something down that they'd been holding for a while. "He wasn't supposed to do that," she said. "He did it anyway. Because he's Marcus." "Because he was worried," Ray said. "Because he's a good person who was worried about you, and so am I." He stopped. Let that sit. "Are you okay?" The specific pause that followed that question. He'd been ready for it. He'd been ready for the, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm always fine." He'd planned exactly how he was going to respond to it. Gently, without pushing, in the way you respond to someone who is using a true answer as a shield. But Emma surprised him. "Some nights are hard," she said. Just that, straight and clean and undecorated. Ray closed his eyes for a second. "Yeah," he said. "I know that." "I have someone I talk to," she said quickly. "I have a therapist. I've had her for 4 years. She's good. I want you to know that before you, I'm not in crisis, Ray. I just have some nights." "I'm not worried about crisis," Ray said. "I'm worried about you having hard nights alone in a city where you don't know anyone yet." A pause. "I know you," she said. Something moved in Ray's chest, not dramatically, quietly, the way things move when they're true. "Yes, you do," he said. "So let me buy you breakfast, or dinner, or whatever the post-night shift equivalent of a meal is." A pause. "Just a meal, Emma. Just 2 people at a table. No big thing." The silence this time was different from all the ones before it. It had a different texture, lighter, with something almost tentative in it, which was not a word that came naturally in connection with Emma Doyle. But there it was. "I'm off tomorrow night," she said finally. "I know a diner on Millbrook," Ray said. And then, because Emma would know immediately that he knew this from having done the research, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. "It's open late. Good coffee." The sound she made then, it was brief and quiet, and it was the Emma Doyle version of a laugh. The same one she'd given via text with that single period. Small and real, and worth more than a louder version from almost anyone else. "Okay," she said. "Millbrook, tomorrow night." Ray looked out the windshield at the parking lot, at the gray October morning, going about its business. "Good," he said. He sat in the car after he hung up and let the cold coffee be cold, and didn't go anywhere for a few minutes. He wasn't thinking about anything in particular. He was just sitting with the specific quality of a morning that had tipped towards something better than it might have been, and taking a breath and being grateful in the plain, uncomplicated way of a man who has learned the hard way to take gratitude where he finds it. In the shop on Carver Road, Derek arrived at 9 and unlocked the front door and turned on the fluorescent lights. And they hummed on the way they always hummed, and the glass cases came into view, and the rifles on the wall, and the small TV, and the American flag decal in the window going pale in the morning light. He made coffee. He checked the inventory notes Ray had left. He pulled up the transfer log and started working through it. He was 24 years old, and he had some thinking to do that he'd been doing now for 12 days, and would probably keep doing for a long time. He was learning what it felt like to be wrong in a way that mattered. Not wrong about a fact, not wrong about a product specification, but wrong about a person. Wrong in the way that cost something. He was learning what that cost felt like and what you did with it. He poured his coffee and stood at the counter and looked at the front door. It jingled. A customer came in, a woman, 40s, in a wool coat and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. Derek looked at her. He didn't make any assumptions about what she knew or didn't know. He didn't let his expression do anything except welcome. "Good morning," he said. "What can I help you with?" The woman smiled. "I'm looking for a home defense shotgun. I've done some reading, but I want some guidance." Derek set his coffee down and gave her his full attention. "Tell me what you've already looked into," he said, "and we'll go from there." The shop opened around them. The day began. The diner on Millbrook Avenue was the kind of place that had been feeding night shift workers and early risers since 1987 and didn't apologize for anything on the menu. The coffee was strong and came in ceramic mugs that had been through the dishwasher so many times the pattern had mostly worn off. The booths were vinyl, dark red, the kind that had absorbed 30 years of conversations and didn't give any of them back. It was exactly the right place for what this was. Ray got there at 10:53. Emma's shift ended at 7, which gave her time to drive home, shower, change, and make it to Millbrook by 11. He'd done the math without acknowledging to himself that he was doing the math, which was a thing he'd been doing about Emma since she walked back into his life 8 days ago. Running calculations he didn't fully admit to running. Showing up early so he'd be there when she arrived, so she'd walk in and see a familiar face already in place, rather than an empty booth in a waiting situation. He was on his second coffee when the door opened. She looked different out of scrubs. Not unrecognizable. The posture was the same. The walk was the same. That deliberate, unhurried step that covered ground efficiently without appearing to hurry. But she was in jeans and a dark green sweater, hair down for once instead of clipped back. And she looked, not softer exactly, but more fully herself. The way people look when they're not wearing a uniform that defines their role for the room. She saw him immediately. Didn't look around, just located him and came over. "You got here early," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm always early," he said. "I know," she said. "You always were." The waitress came and Emma ordered coffee and eggs and toast. In the ordinary domestic rhythm of ordering breakfast at 11 in the morning after a night shift created a specific kind of ease between them. The ease of two people who are both tired and both real, and both past the point of performing anything for each other. "Marcus is going to feel guilty about coming to the shop," Emma said when the waitress left. "He should," Ray said. "A little bit, not a lot. I told him things in that letter I hadn't told people." "I know. And then he just walks into your shop." "He cares about you," Ray said. "He's been carrying that day around for a long time too, Emma. It's not just you." She looked at him. Something moved through her expression, a quick, complicated thing that was there and then gone. "I know that," she said quietly. "I do know that." The coffee came. She wrapped both hands around the mug, the way Marcus had at the counter, and Ray noticed the similarity and said nothing about it. "The dreams," Ray said, not asking, just putting it on the table. Emma looked at her coffee. "They're not every night. They're not even most nights. It's maybe twice a week, sometimes less." She paused. "The new city, probably. New place, new sounds. It unsettles things that were pretty settled." "What happens in them?" She was quiet for a moment. "The street," she said. "Same as I told Marcus, just the street. The specific geometry of it." She paused. "You're in them. You're down and I'm trying to get to you, and there's this distance between us that keeps staying the same. No matter how fast I move, the distance stays the same." Ray's hands were flat on the table. He held very still. "In reality, I got there," she said. Her voice was even. The voice of someone who has been over this enough times in a clinical setting to be able to say it in a diner without falling apart. "In reality, it worked. I know that. My therapist and I have been over it many times, and I know the difference between what happened and what the dream does with it. She looked up. But the dream doesn't care what I know. No, Ray said, it doesn't. He knew about that. He had his own version of it. His involved the ground and the specific cold of it, and the sound Emma made when the round hit her, that sharp exhale, and the way his vision had started to gray at the edges while she worked. He hadn't told her that. He didn't say it now, but it was there in the way he nodded. The nod of someone who isn't just being sympathetic, but is confirming from experience. I'm glad you're seeing someone, he said. 4 years, she said, started before I got out. Some of the guys thought that was, you know how guys are about that. Or were. It's getting better. Getting better, Ray agreed. Slowly. Slowly, she agreed. The food came, they ate. There was conversation in the eating, the practical, connective conversation of people who are getting to know each other again after a gap, filling in the years carefully, not all at once, the way you unpack a box when you're not sure what's fragile. Emma had done 3 more deployments after Fallujah. She'd come home for good in 2010 with a shoulder that had a story in it and a head that had several more. She'd finished her nursing degree in 2013. She'd worked ICU for 5 years in Phoenix, then a trauma unit in Dallas, and now St. Catherine's here, which had recruited her specifically for their trauma team. They know what they got? Ray asked. The corner of her mouth moved. They know I've got field experience, she said. The head nurse who interviewed me asked if I'd ever done a chest seal in a non-clinical environment. I said yes. She hired me on the spot. Good woman, Ray said. Very good woman. They talked about Ray's shop, 23 years of it, the evolution of it, the way the customer base had changed, and the way it hadn't. He talked about building the range in the back 7 years ago, about the veterans discount program he'd started 4 years ago that now served nearly 60 clients a month. Emma listened with the focused attention of someone who is actually interested and not just being polite, asking specific questions at specific moments, the same way she'd asked specific questions about the rifle. It was going well. It was going better than well. It was the specific warmth of 2 people discovering that the years between them hadn't changed the fundamental thing, that the fundamental thing was still there and still sound, just older and more considered. And then Ray's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, a text from Tyler. He almost put it back face down. He was off today. Tyler and the weekend hire had the shop, but something made him read it. Tyler didn't text him on days off unless it was necessary. The text said, "There's someone here asking about you. Says he knows you from the Corps. Name is Garrett Coles. He seems, I don't know how to describe it. He seems off. Thought you should know." Ray read it twice. Then he looked up at Emma. She had read his expression. She was already watching him. "What is it?" she said. He turned the phone so she could see the text. She read it. Her face did something subtle. A shift in the eyes, a very slight tightening around the jaw. That was less about the name and more about the word, off. "Do you know a Garrett Coles?" she asked. "I know the name," Ray said carefully. "We served in the same battalion, different company. I didn't know him well." He paused. "The last thing I heard about Garrett Coles was 3 years ago. A mutual friend mentioned he was having a hard time." Emma looked at the phone. "What kind of hard time?" "The serious kind," Ray said. "The kind that doesn't get better by itself." She looked at him. He looked at her. There was a conversation happening in that look that was faster and more efficient than the spoken kind. 2 people who had both worked in environments where reading a situation quickly was not optional, exchanging information at the speed of recognition. "Go," Emma said. "I'm not leaving you here mid-breakfast." "Ray," her voice was quiet and completely certain. "Go check on your guy. I'll be here when you get back." He looked at her for 1 more second. Then he dropped $40 on the table, pulled on his jacket, and was out the door. The drive to Carver Road took 11 minutes. Ray made it in 8. He came through the front door and the bell jingled, and Tyler looked up from the counter with visible relief on his face. The relief of someone young who has encountered something above his experience level and has been waiting for the adult to arrive. The man sitting on the bench along the near wall was in his late 40s. He was wearing a jacket that was too light for the October cold and hadn't shaved in several days and had the specific hollowed look of a person who hadn't been sleeping. Not the Emma kind of not sleeping, the nurses and veterans who push through it and function regardless, but a different kind, the depletion kind, the kind where the body is running on something other than rest and has been for a while. He looked up when Ray came in. His eyes were still sharp. Whatever else was going on, the eyes were still working. "Ray Dalton," he said. "Garrett," Ray said. He walked to the bench and sat down next to him, not across from him, not at the counter with glass between them. Next to him, eye level. "It's been a long time. 15 years at least," Garrett said. His voice was rougher than Ray remembered. "You look the same." "I look older," Ray said. "You look like you landed okay," Garrett said. And the way he said it, there was no resentment in it, no edge, just observation. The flat, factual comparison of someone assessing where another person ended up versus where he did. "Some days better than others," Ray said honestly. "What brings you here, Garrett?" Garrett looked at his hands. They were resting on his knees, and they were not entirely still. A slight movement, not tremor exactly, more like the surface tension of something held back. "I was driving through," he said. "Saw the shop, thought, I don't know what I thought. I hadn't planned on stopping. But you stopped." "I stopped," Garrett confirmed. A pause. "I've been driving for about 3 days." Ray's jaw didn't tighten. He didn't show anything in his face that would close the conversation off. "Where from?" "Colorado originally. My wife's, we separated in June. I've been staying with my brother in Denver, and that ran its course, and He stopped, started again. "I just needed to be moving, so I started driving." "Okay," Ray said, not dismissively, with the specific weight of a man who is with you in the word. "I'm not drunk," Garrett said suddenly, looking at him directly. "I want to be clear about that. I know what I look like. I'm not drunk. I'm not on anything. He stopped again. "I'm just tired, Ray. I'm real tired." Tyler was behind the counter, doing nothing, not pretending to do anything, just standing there being appropriately invisible. The weekend hire, a 40-year-old named Phil, who had worked at Dalton's for 6 years, was with a customer on the far side of the shop and had sized up the situation at the bench with one quick look and was deliberately keeping his customer occupied over there. Good people, Ray thought. He had good people. "Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" Ray asked. Straight. No softening, no dancing around it. That was the right way to ask. He'd learned that from a VA resource seminar 3 years ago and had never forgotten it. Garrett looked at him. Something moved through his face. Surprise, maybe, that the question had come that directly. Then something else. Something that was almost relief at not having to navigate around it. "No," he said. No, I'm not there." He paused. "I've been there before. A while back. I know what that feels like, and this isn't it. This is just..." He let out a breath. "This is just empty. This is just running out of road and not knowing where the next road is." Ray nodded. He took out his phone. "There's a veterans crisis line," he started. "I know the number," Garrett said. "I know you know it," Ray said. "I'm going to give it to you anyway because that's what I do." He pulled up the contact he kept in his phone specifically for this reason and turned it so Garrett could read it. "And I'm going to give you another number. Guy named Marcus Webb. He runs a veterans support group on Saturday mornings at the Mill Creek Community Center. He's good. He's been through his own version of this, and he knows how to listen." Garrett looked at the screen. "Marcus Webb," he repeated. "He was in Fallujah," Ray said. "He'll know what you're carrying without you having to explain the carrier." Garrett pulled out his own phone and typed both numbers in. He did it slowly, the specific slow of a man whose hands aren't cooperating perfectly, but doing it anyway. Ray watched him type, and in the watching, something became clear to him that he'd been circling without landing on since Garrett walked in. The thing about Garrett Coles was not that he was in crisis. It was that he had been in crisis, had come through some version of it, and was now in the gray zone on the other side. Not falling, but not standing either. Floating in the specific, weightless, terrible space between. Ray knew that space. He had his own personal map of it from the years right after he came home. The door behind them opened. Ray heard the bell. He didn't look immediately because he was watching Garrett type the second number. Then he heard Tyler's voice from the counter. "Can I help?" "Oh." Ray looked up. Emma was standing just inside the door. She had driven here. She had left the diner on Millbrook and gotten in her car and driven to Carver Road and walked through the door of Dalton's Firearms on a Sunday morning. 11 days after the first time she'd done it, and she was looking at Ray and Garrett on the bench with eyes that had already done the quick, automatic assessment. Status of the room, status of the individuals, what's needed. That was as much a part of her as breathing. Ray looked at her, a question in the look. She gave a very small shake of her head. Not leaving, not an intrusion, just here, in case. Garrett had looked up at the bell. He looked at Emma, then back at Ray. "Who's that?" he said. "Her name is Emma Doyle," Ray said. "She's a trauma nurse and a former combat medic, and she is one of the best human beings I have ever encountered in my life." He paused. "She's also apparently unable to eat a quiet breakfast without following me across town to make sure I'm not doing something stupid." Emma's expression from across the room said, "Accurate assessment, no apology." Garrett looked at her for a moment longer. Something passed through his face that was hard to name. An assessment, a calculation, the look of a man who has spent years being careful about who he lets into the perimeter of himself and is deciding, in this specific moment, whether to let the perimeter move. "She know the 68W designation?" he asked Ray. "She is a 68W designation," Ray said. Garrett was quiet. Then slowly, he nodded. Once. The nod of a man making a decision. Emma walked over. She didn't make it a production. She just came to where they were sitting and pulled a chair from the small table nearby and sat down. Not close enough to crowd, close enough to be in the conversation. "Ray texted you," Garrett said. "It wasn't an accusation." "Ray didn't text me," Emma said. "I just had a feeling." She looked at him with the direct, clear regard of someone who has sat at many bedsides and in many field positions and has learned that what people need most is not to be looked away from. "I'm Emma." "Garrett," he said. "How long have you been on the road, Garrett?" "About 3 days." "Eating?" He thought about it. "Yesterday morning, truck stop in Indiana." "Okay," Emma said, not judgmentally, the same way she'd handled everything, taking in information, filing it, deciding what to do with it. "There's a diner 12 minutes from here with good eggs and very strong coffee. I have the rest of the day off." She paused. "Will you come eat something with us?" Garrett looked at her. He looked at Ray. He looked at his hands. "I'm not much company right now," he said. "That's fine," Emma said. "We don't need you to be company. We just need you to eat something." Tyler had moved without being asked. He'd gone behind the counter and was writing something on a notepad. He brought it over and handed it to Ray. It was the address of the diner on Millbrook. He'd looked it up. He handed it over without a word and went back behind the counter. Ray folded the notepad and put it in his pocket and looked at Tyler for 1 second with an expression that said something the young man would carry with him for a long time. Garrett stood up. He did it carefully, the way people stand when they've been sitting on something harder than a bench. The weight of the last few months coming with him as he got to his feet. He was taller than he looked sitting down, broader. He had a veteran's body that had been through things and was still here. Okay, he said. They went out together, Ray and Emma on either side of Garrett, nobody making a ceremony of it. The bell jingled. The door closed behind them. Tyler stood at the counter alone. Phil had finished with his customer and was restocking something on the far wall. The shop was quiet for a moment, that particular quiet that follows the departure of something significant. Phil looked over. "You okay?" "Yeah," Tyler said. He thought about it. "Yeah, I am." He stood at the counter and thought about what he'd just watched. Not the details of it. The surface was easy enough to read. A man in trouble, two people who recognized it and responded to it, and didn't make it into anything more complicated than it needed to be. No performance, no announcement, just response, just movement toward the thing that needed addressing. He thought about Emma on that first Tuesday, the way she'd picked up the gun, the way she'd held it. He thought about Ray's face when the coffee cup hit the floor. He thought about Marcus Webb with his folded paragraph and his hands around a paper cup. He thought about Emma saying, "Some nights are hard," in the same voice she used to order eggs. He thought about Garrett Coles standing up from the bench and saying, "Okay," one word. After 3 days on the road and a marriage ended, and a brother's couch used up and running out of road, one word, "Okay," because two people had sat with him and looked at him and not looked away. He thought about how much it cost Emma to walk through this door the first time, how much it cost any of them, really. Ray with his 15 years of looking, Marcus with his letter in his pocket, Garrett with 3 days of highway behind him and not enough food in him. The cost of moving towards something instead of past it. He thought about a 22-year-old woman running into a street that was still hot because a man was down and the distance had to be crossed, and how she had crossed it without stopping, even when the crossing cost her something. There was a word for that. Tyler was working his way toward it, had been working his way toward it for 12 days now, through the embarrassment and the reckoning and the slow rebuilding of his understanding of what it meant to stand behind a counter and look at the person on the other side and decide who they were. The word was not heroism, exactly, not in the dramatic, capital letter version. It was something quieter and more durable than that. It was the specific willingness to keep moving toward the thing that needed doing, even when it was costly, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was 3 days into a drive that had no destination and you stopped at a gun shop because a sign looked familiar and you needed somewhere to land. Tyler pulled out his phone. He opened his contacts. He scrolled to the number Ray had given him on his second day at the shop. The Veterans Support Line Ray made all his employees keep in their phones, just in case. He looked at it, made sure it was still there. It was. He put the phone away and straightened up and looked at the front door. The bell above it was still. The parking lot outside was ordinary Saturday morning ordinary. He was 22 years old. He'd been wrong about things. He'd been careless in ways that had cost him nothing personally and could have cost someone else something real. He was still working that out. He thought he'd probably keep working it out for a while, and he thought that was the right response. And he thought the thing to do now was to keep getting better at seeing what was in front of him. The door opened. A customer came in, a man in his 60s with a gray ponytail and a seasoned hunting license folded in his jacket pocket. Tyler looked at him. No assumptions, no performance, just genuine attention. "Good morning," he said. "What can I help you with today?" At the diner on Millbrook, Ray, Emma, and Garrett were in a booth in the corner. The eggs had just arrived. Garrett was eating, not quickly, carefully, the way a person eats when their body is remembering that food is something it needs. Emma was watching him with the peripheral attention of someone who is also in a separate conversation, but is tracking a second thing at a different layer. Ray was telling a story about the first year of the shop, something mildly funny about a mislabeled consignment box, and it was working. Garrett's face had loosened slightly, the tightness around his eyes down 1 degree from when they'd come in. It wasn't fixed. Nothing was fixed. A meal and a conversation and 2 phone numbers in a pocket were not a solution to 3 days on the road and 6 months of unraveling. Ray knew that. Emma knew it better than anyone. Garrett himself probably knew it most clearly of all. But they were here, in a booth in a diner on Millbrook Avenue, eating eggs, talking, not past each other, not around each other, but to each other, in the plain and necessary way of people who are willing to be in the same room with what is real. And Garrett Coles, who had been driving without a destination for 3 days, had stopped. That was not nothing. That was, in the specific arithmetic of days like this one, everything. Emma reached across the table and refilled Ray's coffee from the carafe the waitress had left. He glanced at her. She glanced back. No performance, no ceremony, just two people who knew what it cost to keep moving, sitting with someone who was learning it for what felt like the first time, in a diner that had been feeding people since 1987 and would probably keep doing it long after all of them were gone. The coffee was strong. The eggs were good. The October morning moved through its hours outside the window, indifferent and ordinary, and exactly what was needed. Garrett Coles stayed in town for 4 days. He hadn't planned to. He'd parked his car in the diner lot on Millbrook that Sunday morning with the vague intention of eating something and moving on, keeping the movement going because movement was the only thing that had been working. But somewhere between the second cup of coffee and Emma asking him a specific question about the VA counselor he'd stopped seeing in Denver, not pushing, just asking, the same way she asked about barrel specifications, with the kind of genuine, focused interest that makes a person feel that their answer matters. Somewhere in there, the forward momentum dissolved. He slept that night in a motel on Route 9. Not well, but better than the car. He called Marcus Webb the next morning. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Garrett said his name. Marcus said, "Yeah, I know who you are. Ray called me last night. Come to the Saturday group if you can make it." And then, because Marcus was Marcus, he said, "But if you need to talk before Saturday, call me. Anytime. I mean that literally." Garrett hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed and looked at the wall for a while. Not the empty look of someone who has run out of things to think, the active look of someone sorting through too many things at once, trying to figure out which one to pick up first. He called the VA. He made an appointment. It was 3 weeks out, which was not ideal, but it was on the calendar now, and it had a date and a time and a name. And that was more structure than he'd had in 6 months. Then he showered. Then he ate. Then he drove to Dalton's Firearms because Ray had asked him to stop by, and Garrett, who had spent 3 days on the road running from the specific gravity of places that knew him, found that he didn't mind being somewhere that already knew the outline of what he was carrying. Ray put him to work. Not heavy work, nothing that required clearance or expertise. Just shop tasks, restocking, running inventory, helping Phil with the range cleaning that happened every Monday morning. Physical, straightforward, hands-occupied work that asked nothing from the parts of a person that were worn out and gave something useful back to the parts that still had capacity. Derek watched Garrett work on that Monday afternoon. He watched the way the older man moved through the shop, careful, deliberate, not wasting effort. He watched the way Garrett talked to customers when one needed a question answered near the cleaning supplies. Direct, no performance, no assumption about what the person across from him knew or didn't know. He watched that and recognized something in it. After Garrett left for the day, Derek stood at the counter and said to Ray, "How do you know when someone needs help versus when they just need space?" Ray looked at him. "What made you think of that?" "Garrett," Derek said, "he came in here and you knew what to do. I would have said the wrong thing. I would have tried too hard or backed off too much." "You probably would have," Ray agreed, without cruelty. "First time." "How do you learn it?" Ray thought for a genuine moment. "You pay attention," he said finally, "not to what they're saying first, to what they're not saying, what they're doing with their hands, whether they're making eye contact or avoiding it, whether they sat down voluntarily or lowered themselves like the weight was making the decision." He paused. "And then you ask the direct question, not around it, Not underneath it, the direct question. Because the direct question tells them they're not going to have to drag you to the point. They can just say it. Derek was quiet, working with it. Garrett wasn't hiding what was going on, Ray continued. He was just waiting to see if he'd have to. The moment he saw he didn't, that was when he sat back. Derek nodded. This was different from the nodding he'd done 2 weeks ago. Less reflexive, more earned. I've been thinking about going to the Saturday group, he said. Not because I'm fine, I just mean, you want to be useful, Ray said. Derek blinked. Yeah, actually. Marcus takes volunteers, Ray said. People who come and listen and help keep the space running. You don't have to be a veteran to show up for other people. He picked up a parts list from the counter. Ask Tyler. He's been going for 2 weeks. Derek's head came up. Tyler's going? Every Saturday morning, Ray said. Doesn't make a thing of it. Derek stood with that for a moment. In the specific arithmetic of his self-image, Tyler had always been the one behind. Younger, less experienced, the follower. The idea that Tyler had moved towards something before him was not a comfortable idea, but it was a useful one. He recognized it as useful even as it was uncomfortable, which was itself a form of progress. Okay, Derek said. Yeah, I'll ask him. Ray went back to the parts list. The shop did what shops do on Monday afternoons. Quiet and purposeful, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional customer, and the work of keeping a place in order. Neither of them mentioned Emma, but she was present in the room the way she had been present since that first Tuesday. A specific weight in the air, a reference point. Everything that had changed in the shop in the last 2 weeks had changed because she had walked through the door and stood at the counter and been herself, completely and without announcement, and the room had had to rearrange around what was true. Ray was thinking about her on Thursday evening when she texted him. Not about anything complicated, just long shift. The hospital cafeteria ran out of coffee at 2 a.m. Tragedy. He read it, and the thing that happened in him was simple and warm and completely inconvenient, and he acknowledged it honestly to himself for the first time, sitting in the back office of his shop at 9 in the evening. He typed back, "There's a 24-hour place on 5th that has excellent coffee and will serve it to people in scrubs without judgment." She replied, "Noted. You seem to know a lot of places that serve coffee at inconvenient hours." He replied, "Occupational habit." She replied, "Good habit." He put the phone down and looked at the office wall for a moment. Then he picked the phone back up and typed, "Are you free Sunday morning?" 3 minutes passed. He went back to the inventory spreadsheet. He was on the second line when she replied, "Depends on the diner." He smiled. He actually smiled, alone in his back office at 9:15 on a Thursday evening, at a text message from a woman who communicated in the specific, minimalist shorthand of someone who chose every word deliberately and meant all of them. He typed, "I'll find a good one." She sent a period. He went back to the inventory spreadsheet, but his mind was not fully on the inventory. Saturday came. Marcus Webb's Veterans Group met at 9 in the morning in the back room of the Mill Creek Community Center. A plain, warm room with folding chairs and a coffee table that had seen better decades, and a whiteboard that nobody ever used. Marcus ran it without ceremony, without a formal structure that would make people feel they had enrolled in something. People came and sat and talked, or didn't talk, and coffee circulated, and nobody had to explain themselves before they were ready. Garrett was there. He came in early and sat in a chair near the wall and drank his coffee and didn't say much for the first 40 minutes. Marcus didn't prompt him. He let Garrett watch. Let him hear other people's versions of things. Let the room be what it was, a place where the specific things you carried didn't need to be hidden because everyone around you was carrying their own version. Tyler came in at 9:05 with 2 extra cups from the place on 5th because he'd texted Marcus the night before to ask if he should bring coffee, and Marcus had said yes, always. Tyler was 22 years old and had no military service and had shown up anyway, every Saturday for 2 weeks, because something in him had opened up on a Tuesday afternoon in a gun shop and had not closed. He saw Garrett across the room and nodded. Garrett nodded back. They had spoken twice since Sunday, small conversations, practical exchanges, the kind that don't announce themselves as meaningful, but accumulate into something that is. Derek came in at 9:15. He stood in the doorway for a moment with the specific uncertainty of someone entering a space they've never been in and don't know the protocol for. Marcus looked at him from across the room. "Come in," he said, not loudly, just clearly. "There's coffee." Derek came in. He sat down 3 chairs from Tyler. Tyler glanced at him and said, "Hey," and went back to listening to the conversation in the room. Derek sat with his coffee and did the thing that had been hard for him 2 weeks ago and was getting easier. He closed his mouth and listened. At 9:47, Garrett spoke for the first time. He didn't address anyone specifically. He just started talking, quietly, without preamble, about Denver, about his wife, about the specific shape of the months since June, the way they had felt progressively smaller, the walls coming in not dramatically but consistently, day by day, the room of his life getting just slightly narrower each week, until 3 days on the highway felt like the only place left with any air in it. The room listened. Marcus didn't interject. He sat in his chair across the circle and let Garrett have the space. And when Garrett got to the part about pulling into a strip mall on Carver Road and seeing a sign he recognized, Marcus looked at the table rather than at Garrett, giving him the privacy of not being watched at the hard part. Derek was looking at the floor. His jaw was set. His hands were around his coffee cup, and he was holding it like it was the steadiest thing in the room right then. Garrett talked for 12 minutes. When he was done, the room was quiet for a few seconds. The respectful silence of people who know that what was just said deserved space before anything else came into it. Then a man on the far side of the circle, a Marine, 50-something, who'd been coming to this group for 2 years, said, "Yeah, I know that road. I've driven it." And that was all. Just that. But it was exactly the right thing, and the room shifted slightly and breathed. After the group ended, Derek was pulling on his jacket near the door when Garrett stopped next to him. "Ray told me what happened," Garrett said, "when she first came in." Derek looked at him. His first instinct was defensive, a quick tightening of the jaw, the preparation of an explanation. He overrode it deliberately. "Yeah," he said. "I've been dismissed like that," Garrett said. "Not with anger, just as a fact. Couple years back, I went to talk to someone at a VA office. Young guy, desk job, looked at me and decided in about 15 seconds what category I was in and what I needed." He paused. "Took me 2 more years to try again." Derek looked at him. The weight of that landed exactly where it was supposed to. "I'm sorry," Derek said, and he meant it in the specific, serious way that doesn't fold in on itself and become about the person saying it. "I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry for what I did." Garrett nodded. He looked at Derek for a moment, assessing, in the way of someone who has learned to be careful about what they let in. Then something in his face settled. "You showed up today," Garrett said. "Yeah," Derek said. "That matters," Garrett said simply, and he walked out. Derek stood in the doorway of the community center room for a moment. The folding chairs were being stacked by volunteers. Tyler was helping stack them, talking to Marcus about something. The whiteboard nobody ever used caught the morning light from the high window. Derek put his jacket on and went to help with the chairs. That same Saturday morning at 10:45, Emma Doyle was at St. Catherine's Hospital in a family consultation room on the 3rd floor, sitting across a small table from a woman named Carol Reyes, who was 47 years old and whose husband had been brought into the trauma unit the previous night with a critical injury from a workplace accident. Emma was not on shift. She had come in on her day off because the charge nurse had called her at 7 in the morning and said, "The family is struggling. Mrs. Reyes is asking for you specifically. You were with her last night when he came in. Emma had said, I'll be there in 40 minutes. She sat across from Carol Reyes and did what she had been doing, in various forms, since she was 22 years old, in a place that was the opposite of a consultation room. She was fully present, both hands flat on the table, in reach but not invading, eyes level. The specific quality of attention that communicates without words. I am here. I am not going anywhere. Take whatever time you need. Carol Reyes talked. She talked about her husband and her kids in the morning it had all gone wrong, and the things that needed to be handled that she didn't know how to handle, and the things she was afraid to ask the doctors because she was afraid of the answers. Emma listened. She answered the questions that had answers and sat honestly inside the ones that didn't, and did not once look at the door or at her phone or anywhere except at Carol Reyes. When it was over, when Carol had said what she needed to say and taken the tissue Emma had placed quietly at the edge of the table and gathered herself back into the functional version of herself that would need to make phone calls and talk to her kids and manage the next few days, she looked at Emma and said, You didn't have to come in. Emma said, Yes, I did. Carol looked at her for a second. How do you carry all of this? All the things you see? How does it not? She stopped, not sure how to finish. Emma thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. Some nights are hard, she said. I have someone I talk to, and I have people who... She paused. I have people now. Something moved briefly through her expression. That's relatively new, actually, but it helps. Carol nodded. Something in what Emma had said, the specific honesty of, I have people now, the small admission inside it, had reached her in a different way than the clinical kindness would have. Because it was not clinical, it was just true. Emma walked to her car in the St. Catherine's parking structure at 11:58. She stood at the back of her car with her hand on the hatch, same as she had 12 days ago, same spot, same posture. But it was different this time. She was aware that it was different. Not because the hard things were gone. The nights were still what they were. The dream with the street and the distance that wouldn't close still came when it decided to come. That hadn't changed. What had changed was the people on the other side of the door when she went home. Not physically. She still went home alone. She still had the quiet house and the locked safe and the practical self-sufficiency of someone who had been operating independently for a long time. But there was a phone in her pocket with Ray Dalton's number in it and Marcus Webb's voice in her voicemail from Tuesday, and a text thread with Garrett that had started with him asking a question about St. Catherine's trauma unit hours and had somehow turned into a real conversation. She had people. She had said it to Carol Reyes and heard herself say it and understood in the hearing of it that it was true. She got in the car. She was on Route 9 when her phone buzzed on the seat. She waited until the light to look at it. It was Ray. It said, Found the diner. Best eggs in the city, apparently. Confirmed by 3 separate Yelp reviews from people named Donna. I trust Donna. She read it at the red light. The corner of her mouth moved. She typed back, one-handed before the light changed. What time? He replied in 30 seconds. 10, unless you have a better offer from Donna. She pulled through the light and drove and did not reply until she was parked outside her building. Then she looked at the phone and looked at the message and sat with it for a second. The specific weight of a simple, ordinary plan between 2 people who had found their way back to each other through 15 years and a war and a strip mall on Carver Road. The ordinary, extraordinary weight of that. She typed, 10 works. Don't be late. He replied, I'm always early. She replied with a period, her version of a laugh. He would know that by now. She got out of the car and went inside. The following Saturday, 3 weeks and 2 days after Emma Doyle first walked through the door of Dalton's Firearms, Marcus Webb's Veterans Group had its highest attendance of the year. 16 people. The folding chairs made a full circle for the first time in months. Tyler had brought coffee again, 2 extra-large carriers from the place on 5th, and this time Derek had come early and helped him set the chairs up. Garrett was there. He had pushed the VA appointment up by 10 days after a cancellation and had his first session on Wednesday. He had not come out of it fixed. That was not how it worked, and he knew it better than anyone. But he had come out of it less alone in the weight of it, which was the thing that mattered in the immediate. He sat in the circle with his coffee, and when it was his turn, he talked a little more than the week before. Not because the words were easier, but because the room had proved itself trustworthy. And trust was something Garrett Coles could still do, it turned out, given the right conditions. Ray was not at the group. Ray was at the shop, because Saturday was busy and Phil and Tyler were both at the group, and someone had to be at the counter. But he had called Marcus at 8 in the morning to ask how things were looking, and Marcus had said, "Full circle today," and Ray had said, "Good," and that had been enough. At 2 in the afternoon, Derek came back from the group and hung up his jacket and went behind the counter and picked up where the morning had left off. He was different from the Derek who had slapped a gun on the counter mat 3 weeks ago with a smirk and a sweetheart. Not completely different. He was still 24, still quick, still had the confidence that would probably always be part of his particular wiring. But something had been installed in him that hadn't been there before. A pause. A small, crucial pause between perception and reaction. The space where the most important decisions get made. A customer came in at 2:15. A young woman, mid-20s, in work clothes, moving with the kind of tired efficiency of someone coming from a long shift in a different direction than Emma's shift, but the same category of long. She came to the counter and looked at Derek. "I'm looking for something for home defense," she said. "I don't have a lot of experience. I'm just starting to look." Derek looked at her. He did not make any calculation about what she knew or didn't know. He did not look at Tyler. He did not fill the silence with anything that came from himself. "Tell me a little about your situation," he said. "What are you looking to protect? What's the layout? Have you had any training? Just give me whatever you've got and we'll figure out where to start." The woman blinked. She had been prepared probably for something different, for the pat on the head version, for the "we've got something perfect for someone like you" version. She looked at Derek for a second, as if recalibrating. Then she started talking, and Derek listened. Ray was in the back office at 4 in the afternoon when Tyler knocked on the doorframe. He had a look on his face that Ray had come to recognize in the last 3 weeks. The look of someone who had something to say and was deciding how to say it. "What is it?" Ray said. Tyler came in. He sat in the chair across the desk, which was something he'd never done before. He had always hovered in doorways in Ray's office. Sitting down was a statement about what kind of conversation this was. "I've been thinking about what I want to do," Tyler said. "After this, I mean. Not that I want to leave. I don't. I want to stay." He paused. "But I've been thinking about training. The VA has a peer support specialist certification. It's a real program. You train to support other veterans through transition and mental health stuff. It's not therapy. You're not a therapist, but you're someone who shows up and knows how to be present." Ray looked at him. "Marcus told me about it," Tyler said. "I'd have to take some courses. It's not fast." He paused. "But I want to do something. Not just show up on Saturdays and stack chairs." He looked at Ray. "I want to be able to do what you did with Garrett, what Emma did. I want to be able to recognize it and respond to it and not do the wrong thing because I'm young and I don't know better." Ray was quiet for a moment. He looked at the 22-year-old sitting across from him. This kid who 2 weeks ago couldn't figure out how to not laugh at the wrong moment. And he felt something that was somewhere between pride and gratitude and the specific emotion that doesn't have a clean name. The one that shows up when you watch a person decide to become something more than they were. "Get me the program information," Ray said. "I'll cover the course fees." Tyler looked at him. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Ray said. "Get me the information." Tyler nodded. Not the reflexive nod, the other kind. "Okay," he said. "Thank you, Ray." He got up and went back to the floor. Ray sat in the office and looked at the wall for a moment. Then he looked at the framed photograph on his desk. He'd had it there for 11 years, a unit photo from before the deployment. 23 men in 2 rows, desert background, squinting into the sun. He could name every face in it. He knew which ones had come home and which ones hadn't. He knew which ones had come home fine and which ones had come home the other kind of fine. The functional, costly, working around it kind. He looked at those faces for a long moment. Then he looked at his phone. Sunday was tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Best eggs in the city, confirmed by Donna. He thought about Emma saying, "I have people now." The specific pause before it, the small admission in it from a woman who had spent 15 years building the kind of self-sufficiency that doesn't require people, because the requiring had always been a risk she hadn't been willing to run. She was running it now. He was running it now. That was something. That was, in the plain and honest accounting of lives lived forward through difficult things, a great deal. He turned off the desk lamp and went back to the floor. 3 weeks ago, Emma Doyle had walked through the door of a gun shop on a Tuesday afternoon, and 2 young men had laughed at her. They had looked at the blue scrubs and the canvas tote bag and the tired eyes, and they had made their calculations and gotten them completely wrong. They had stood behind a glass counter and decided, in the way that people decide things when they haven't yet been asked to examine their own assumptions, that they already knew what she was. They did not know what she was. They did not know the street in Fallujah, or the round in the shoulder, or the 11 years of night shifts in trauma bays, and Carol Reyes across small tables in consultation rooms. They did not know the dreams about the distance that wouldn't close, or the therapist 4 years running, or 3 weeks of driving past a strip mall before finally stopping. They did not know that quiet and tired and in blue scrubs could contain multitudes that would rearrange everything in a room. They knew now. And Garrett Coles knew that a strip mall on Carver Road could be the place where the road found its next direction. And Tyler knew that 22 was not too young to decide what kind of person to become, if you were willing to sit with the discomfort of being wrong and let it teach you something. And Marcus Webb knew that the letters people write when they don't want to make a thing of it are always the ones that say the most. And Ray Dalton knew that 15 years is a long time to carry something alone, and that the weight doesn't disappear when you set it down, but it becomes shareable. And shared weight is a different thing entirely from carried weight. The fluorescent lights hummed in Dalton's firearms on a Saturday afternoon. The glass cases held what they held. The rifles stood in their rows. The American flag decal in the window had gone pale in the years of sun, but was still there, still standing for something, the way things do when they are built to last. And outside on Carver Road, ordinary life moved through its ordinary Saturday hours. Cars and people in the early darkening October light, indifferent to the small, permanent changes that had occurred inside a gun shop on a Tuesday afternoon when a woman in blue scrubs walked through the door and was exactly who she was, without announcement, without apology, without asking a single person in that room to recognize it. She hadn't needed them to recognize it. She had never needed that. But it turned out that the recognition, the long, slow, sometimes painful process of seeing what was actually there, was something the people doing it needed far more than she ever had. And that was the real story. Not what Emma Doyle had done and survived and carried, but what happened to a room full of ordinary people when the truth walked in and stood quietly at the counter and waited to be seen. It waited, and eventually they looked, and everything that came after began exactly there.